Welcome back to The Mystery with Jensen and Marley. Like and follow our podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Follow us on Facebook and text or email who you think did it to jensen@jensenday.com. Jensen was inspired to create this mystery because of his own high school graduation happening today. Congratulations to Jensen and all the other 2025 graduates. 3 weeks have passed since the Legacy High School senior class experienced a traumatic loss. The whole school has had trouble adjusting since the disastrous senior trip took place. Alice still has not returned to school since she's been mourning the loss of her best friend. Mr. Taylor has been even more sullen and reserved than usual. Mr. Blair is doing his best to stay strong for the whole school. The entire senior class is shaken and distraught, especially as graduation inches closer. But they know they have to be strong and finish what they've worked so hard for 4 years. Monday, May 12th was the start of graduation week. A week that was supposed to be joyous and exciting, but instead was clouded by grief and sadness. The senior class sat in homeroom thinking about all that has happened in the last month. Instead of reminiscing on happy times from the past 4 years, they couldn't help but think about all that Jennifer would be missing out on. Mrs. Libby was doing her best to make sure the students still felt celebrated. She worked with them to plan class parties and student and staff awards for the banquet tomorrow night. Other teachers did as much as they could to minimize final exams and projects. In a time of terrible tragedy, Legacy was a strong community and held tight to one another. The next morning, Jeremy and Connor rode to school together. Connor had been noticing how Jeremy seemed off recently. He had clearly not been getting much sleep and rarely lifted his head off of his desk in class. Connor knew everyone was struggling, but he was really beginning to worry about Jeremy. On their car ride, he asked, "How have you been doing? I know it's been a lot, especially with graduation coming up." "I'm alright, I just haven't been sleeping good lately," Jeremy replied. "I get it, I have trouble sleeping too. I can't help but think about Jennifer and wonder what happened to her and why." Jeremy was silent at this. "I know it was ruled an accident and they say she fell when the plane messed up or whatever, but something about that just doesn't seem right," Connor persisted. Jeremy stayed quiet for a second and then whispered, "It wasn't an accident." Connor darted his head over to Jeremy. "What did you say?" "It wasn't an accident," Jeremy repeated, his eyes still on the road. "What do you mean? How do you know that? What happened? Who did it?" Jeremy pulled into the school parking lot. "We're not talking about this. We never talked about this. Forget I ever said anything." But Jeremy, how do you know that?" "I just do," Jeremy replied and slammed the truck door shut. The rest of the day was uneventful, but Connor couldn't get this conversation with Jeremy off of his head. His head reeled with possibilities of what could have happened on the plane that day. He wondered how Jeremy could keep this information to himself and why. He thought about it all the way home and back to school later that evening for the awards banquet. Alice entered the school that night for the first time since she'd lost her best friend. Everyone greeted her warmly and delicately. She sat next to Olivia and Sarah. They didn't say anything to her. They just squeezed her hand tightly. Alice didn't love being treated with such pity, but she knew deep down that that's what she needed. Mr. Blair walked on stage to begin the ceremony. The first awards were presented to Jennifer in her memory. Sniffles were heard throughout the crowd. The rest of the evening went rather smoothly. It was a nice celebration of the senior class and their individual accomplishments as students and people. After the banquet, the seniors went to Waffle House. All 14 of them piled into a booth. They ate waffles and hash browns and laughed until their stomachs hurt. This was the first time since they lost Jennifer that they were all able to catch up and laugh together. As they all sat and ate, Alice started to tear up. Drew noticed and asked if she was okay. Alice explained, "I'm okay, I'm just taking this all in. I wasn't sure if I was even going to be able to make it back to school for graduation, you know." Sarah sighed. "We all understand. It's hard to celebrate when she doesn't get to. It just feels kind of unfair. Like, why Jennifer? It could have been any of us, really." They all sat silently. Jeremy thought to himself that it couldn't have been just any of them. It was Jennifer for a reason, and he was the only one that knew why. It was right as Jeremy had that thought that Connor slipped up by saying, "I doubt it was just a freak accident. It feels like she might have had a target on her back." Alice piped in at that. "What's that supposed to mean? Why would somebody be out to get Jennifer? Everyone loved her. She was amazing. She was my best friend." "Yeah, what, Connor? That's ridiculous," Jeremy let out in an attempt to shut down this conversation before it started. Connor deflected. "You guys are right. I don't know why I said anything. It's just been on my mind a lot." An awkward silence hung among the group. Some nodded in agreement with Connor. Alice scolded in his direction. Jeremy got up from the table and walked away. Connor felt bad for slipping up like that after his talk with Jeremy, but he could not be the only one thinking it. What happened to Jennifer never felt like an accident to him, and his conversation with Jeremy only confirmed that. He needed to get to the bottom of it. Wednesday and Thursday passed by slow. Despite the celebrations at school and practicing for graduation, the seniors were counting down the hours until they got to walk across that stage, and everyone that passed felt like a lifetime to them. Especially to Alice, who not only was having to experience all of this without her best friend, but also could not forget what Connor said at dinner the other night. Eventually, Friday rolled around, and counting hours turned to counting minutes. Jeremy and Connor hadn't talked since Tuesday night, and Connor was dying to find out more from him. They walked in the school building that afternoon, and Connor stopped Jeremy. "Hey, can we talk later?" Jeremy turned towards Connor. "I'm not going to tell you anything, especially after what you did the other night." "I'm sorry, dude. I just can't get it off of my mind. Please, I need some kind of closure. I don't know how you can just live with this information. Does that not torture you?" Jeremy snapped back. "Of course it does, but I have to. Now leave it alone. After tonight, none of us ever have to see each other again, so why don't you just forget about it?" Jeremy stormed off and passed by Alice, who noticed the tense look on his face. She asked Connor what was going on with him, and he hesitated to answer her. He knew Jeremy was having a rough time holding on to whatever information he had, and Connor felt bad for him. He knew it wasn't his business to tell, but he also knew it was unfair that something horrible had happened to Jennifer and nobody knew the truth. So he opened up to Alice. "What I said at Waffle House the other night, it wasn't just based off of an instinct I had. Jeremy told me that Jennifer's death wasn't an accident. Something bad happened to her. I think someone killed her, and Jeremy knows who it was." Alice just stood there stunned. She shook her head, her hands started to shake, and tears started to well up in her eyes. She ran off. Mrs. Libby caught Alice in the women's restroom crying so hard her whole body shook. Mrs. Libby ran over to her and held her tight. Once she was able to calm Alice down enough to speak, she asked her what was going on. Alice didn't even think before saying, "Someone killed Jennifer. Someone killed her." She was still trying to catch her breath. Mrs. Libby asked where she heard that, and Alice admitted that Jeremy knew what happened. Mrs. Libby was shocked. She didn't know what to do, but she did know that graduation was in an hour, and Alice needed to gather herself enough to get across the stage. She helped Alice calm down, wash her face, and promised her that they would handle this situation once graduation was over. Most of the girls had heard that Alice was having a breakdown. Of course, they assumed she was upset about Jennifer, but she had seemed fine before talking to Connor. Tensions were high when Alice joined the senior class as they gathered to walk through the ceremony one last time. Alice couldn't look at Jeremy, Jeremy couldn't look at Connor, and Connor couldn't stop looking at the both of them. Everyone knew something was up. The final walkthrough concluded, and guests began to fill up the gymnasium. Although things had been weird and everyone was thinking about Jennifer in one way or another, the senior class was eager to graduate and everyone was excited to celebrate them. The ceremony began as Principal Blair gave an opening statement about the class of 2025. He spoke about the trials and tribulations they've been through together as a class and how it has only made them stronger. The valedictorian, Drew, gave his speech. Then Mrs. Libby took the stage to present a posthumous degree in Jennifer's honor. As Jennifer's family was about to walk up to the stage to receive Jennifer's diploma, Alice ran up to the stage and grabbed the mic from Mrs. Libby. She couldn't take it any longer. She had to tell everyone what happened. For Jennifer. "What happened to my best friend was not an accident. It wasn't an unfortunate tragedy that could have happened to anyone on that plane. Someone was out to get Jennifer, and they succeeded. And Jeremy Brooks and his family know who killed her. They've been hoarding this information for a month while Jennifer's family and friends have been suffering from the loss. Jennifer deserves justice." Jennifer's family stood frozen at the end of the aisle while not-so-quiet whispers filled up the room. Jeremy turned around in his seat to look for his family. From the stage, Mrs. Libby could see Jeremy's mom and grandmother, Sherry, whispering to one another. It was in that moment that she had put the pieces together. Sherry had been sitting near Mrs. Libby on the flight that day, and she wasn't in her seat when the lights went out. Jeremy knew what had happened to Jennifer and has been hiding it to protect his grandmother. Mrs. Libby leaned over and quietly told Alice her revelation as Mr. Blair was hollering over the crowd trying to keep the ceremony going. All of his efforts were thrown out the window whenever Alice jumped off the stage and bolted towards Jeremy's grandmother. Jeremy watched Alice sprint towards his grandmother, her eyes wild with fury, her hands balled into fists. He stood too, panic rising in his throat as people began to shout. Teachers trying to maintain order, parents standing, phones out, recording, gasping, screaming. Connor intercepted Alice just before she reached Sherry Brooks, grabbing her arms and holding her back as she kicked and shouted, "She killed her! She killed Jennifer!" Sherry stood frozen, eyes wide, clinging to her handbag like a shield. Jeremy's mother stepped between them, trying to calm everyone down. Mr. Blair was still on stage, stunned and unsure what he could possibly do to mediate this situation. And then the lights went out, and a sharp crack echoed throughout the gymnasium. One scream, then another, then dozens. In the panic, the room became a blur of confusion and chaos. Some people tried to run, but it was so crowded and dark. People knocked over chairs, trampled programs, and spilled into the aisles in a mad attempt to get out. When the emergency lights flickered on moments later, Jeremy Brooks lay face down on the gym floor, a dark crimson stain soaking through his graduation gown. He wasn't moving. He wasn't breathing. Shouts turned to wails. Alice backed away, trembling. Connor stood in shock, mouth agape. Sherry screamed, collapsing to her knees beside her grandson. The police arrived within minutes, locking down the school. Students were herded into classrooms. Parents were questioned. No one had seen who did it. There was no weapon found and no clear suspect. No one saw anything, or if they did, they weren't talking. All anyone could agree on was this. Jennifer hadn't been the only victim, and now Jeremy was gone too. But the killer was still out there, still watching, still part of Legacy High. Graduation night ended not with cheers and photographs, but with crime scene tape and unanswered questions. Thanks for watching The Mystery with Jensen and Marley. Like and follow our podcast on Spotify, Amazon Music, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Facebook and text or email who you think did it to Jensen@jensenday.com. And remember, don't reveal the mystery.